All right, all right. Happy Friday, guys. Welcome to Sabs podcast. I'm your host, sabrinasalvati. My special guest tonight is Peter Daou. He is a Lebanese American political strategist, activist, musician, and author who has advised major political figures, including Hillary Clinton and John Kerry. Peter was also the former campaign manager for Marianne Williamson, and he is now the campaign manager for Dr. Cornel West. Welcome, Peter. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you, Sabby. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
So before we get into Dr. West's campaign, because I know a lot of us saw that announcement that came from Dr. West and yourself on Twitter that you are now his campaign manager, I want to start from the very beginning and kind of go in chronological order here, if I may. How did you get into electoral politics and why did you decide to get into electoral politics to begin with?
Great. And if you don't mind, I'm going to go to the very beginning of where I was born. I was born in Beirut, Lebanon. My dad was Lebanese and my mom was American. First 10 years of my life, Lebanon is a beautiful place. But at the age of 10, the Lebanese Civil War began. And the rest of my childhood and all my teens was just horrors, just violence, bomb shelters, escaped death maybe 20 times. It was hell. It was hell on earth. And I eventually got out and moved to New York to go to college and got into the music business after college. I had been playing jazz. What got me through the war, I would sit in bomb shelters and I had a little sort of shortwave radio that my dad had on batteries. With no electricity, all by candlelight, bombs are falling. And there was the Voice of America had a jazz show. There was a famous DJ called Willis Conover. And he would play Oscar Peterson and Art Tatum and, all these great artists. Ella Fitzgerald and Sarah Vaughan, and I'd listen to that as the bombs were falling, and I became a jazz lover, and it saved me. I studied classical piano, etc., and came to New York, downtown New York, the Village is like the jazz life. And for me, I lucked into the dance music community in the very early days, like late 80s, early 90s, and I met some really now very famous DJs, Frankie Knuckles, who had moved from Chicago, the godfather of house music. And because I was a jazz musician, all these DJs needed somebody to play keyboards for them with a little bit more musical knowledge. And I became one of 3 or 4 keyboardists in New York who did just about every remix that ever came out in the 90s. So, hundreds upon hundreds of records my name has appeared on, from Miles Davis to Janet Jackson, Mariah, Diana Ross, on and on and on. And it was an incredible time. And then George Bush was elected, or selected, I say. And at that point, I thought, I'd never worn a suit in my life. I was in my 30s. I didn't even know how to tie a tie. I remember the first time I went to like a political meeting, it's like I had to look online, or I don't even know if there was online. Then it's like, how do you tie a tie? But I started getting into online, if you recall, the Netroots, which was sort of the grassroots internet community. The beginning of bloggers, Daily Kos and Josh Marshall and, Fire Dog Lake and that community. Matt Stoller, Jerome Armstrong, etc. Glenn Greenwald, Cenk. I mean, that was a little circle of us, and we were just sort of figuring out this blog thing. And in 2003, I'd become I'd doing a lot of writing, a lot of protesting. I mean, I got into politics, to answer your question, Sabby, to protest George Bush. I'd lived through war in the Middle East, and here's this guy making a war based on lies, and Democrats are going along and giving him the power to do it. So I was in sit-ins and die-ins and marches and protests. I was basically an anti-war activist. The Democratic Party said, hey, Peter, why don't you come be a liaison to the Netroots? That was my job. If you look, like 2006, New York Times wrote an article when I first worked for Hillary Clinton, describing me as the liaison to the progressive Netroots. My whole thing was, I'm part of this community, maybe I can bring the ethos into the establishment. So my start in politics was anti-war activism, and I sort of got sucked into the system. Now, I made the mistake that I'm seeing people I respect making, which is I thought, I can bring this Netroots and progressive grassroots energy into the system and we'll change the system. Sure enough, 20 years later, I didn't change the system changed me, and I'm sitting here attacking my progressive friends, defending Hillary Clinton. And I want to say up front, I'm very sorry about the things I did then, because I was a very, very sort of like vigorous advocate. I'm loyal. I'm Lebanese, right? It's like you're in the trenches with someone you're fighting, but I was just wrong because I was attacking my own friends who were Bernie Sanders supporters. When I first started, Bernie, Paul Wellstone, people like that were my idols, right? So here I am, and I had to do a lot of soul searching. So I was viciously attacked. I look back at those days. I look at Jimmy Dore and others. They despised me at the time. A lot of the left community online, and I understand. I totally get it. Like, I had two ways I could have gone with this. Either I just double down, be the establishment guy, screw you, you don't matter, or listen. So I thought, I did a lot of soul searching, and with Leela, my wife, and I said, you know what? They're right, I'm wrong. So what do I do now? And I thought, okay, apologize, learn and grow, listen. And I've spent 7 years doing that. 7 years listening to this community. Even to this day, I read some of the commentary about me. I understand where it's coming from. I'm a Christian man, born in deep faith in the mountains of, like, the biblical mountains of Lebanon, where my hometown was Byblos, where the word Bible comes from. And that deep sense of faith teaches me forgiveness. And I can't listen to critics and say, oh, you're bad and you're wrong. I have to accept it with humility and explain things. Well, I'm here with you, Sabby, because I want to explain some of the stuff, because I'm reading a lot of stuff that's just factually wrong. And I don't think that's fair to Dr. West, because I'm working with him. And I think it's only right that I correct the record on some stuff. And I really appreciate you giving me the opportunity to do this. So that's my story of how I got to this point. And any questions you have for me, I'm happy to answer.
Thank you so much for that. Well, we welcome all different voices on this show. So my audience is familiar with different voices. I don't like creating an echo chamber. So we're going into Hillary Clinton's campaign. There was a tweet from you in 2012.
Yeah.
And it says, a retweet, Marnie Mix, today voters can get angry and vote for Jill Stein 2012. So for those who are not familiar, some people in the chat are really young. Jill Stein also ran in 2012, not just 2016. And it says, vote for Jill Stein to end poverty, protect civil liberties, and halt climate change. And that was tweeted from you November 6th of 2012. So I'm curious. It seems like back then you understood, you realized like the threat of climate change, you realized like what Jill Stein was running on. So after 2012, why not go and work with the Jill Stein campaign in 2016 instead of working with Hillary Clinton's campaign?
That's a great question. So over the years, Sabby, I've been critical of Democrats. People who know me from 2003, 2004, I was railing against the Democrats for giving Bush the authority to basically kill 1 million Iraqis and commit war crimes, and everybody responsible for enabling that. So I've never been shy to criticize Democrats. I went out after Obama hard about the drone, and people know a lot of this writing is no longer online because things get lost from that period. But people who know me know how hard I was about the drone strikes, especially some of the immigration stuff, the healthcare stuff. It's like, you have this opportunity, you have a supermajority, and now we're doing a Mitt Romney plan for healthcare. So in 2012, I saw Jill was running, and I didn't really know much about her, but I thought, okay, let's primary Obama. Let's get something different and try to make change. I've always had that progressive blood in me, but I believed in my heart. I have a child, I have a family, and I believed that representation, first woman president, overrode some of the ethical concerns I had, especially about Iraq, with Hillary Clinton. And I worked with a lot of Democrats at the time. I was the sort of internet guy. So I worked with senators and congresspeople and organizations like Planned Parenthood and on and on and on. I was like the digital advisor with just a handful of other people who were at the beginning, inception of that. And so I felt that, because in 2008, I had already worked with Hillary as an advisor. I ran her internet department. Again, I'm still the digital person. I wasn't running her strategy or her campaign. I was running the digital department. That was what I did. So when she decided to run again in 2016, so 2012, I didn't really work for anybody at that point. I was just doing organizations mainly, like Campaign for Tobacco-Free Kids, and everything progressed. Like I want to say something, Sabby, that's very important. This notion that I'm some sort of shadowy operative mercenary. If I were a mercenary, I'd work for oil companies. I'd work for Republicans. I'd work for the military industrial complex. I have avoided every single opportunity to enrich myself from my very fortunate political career. 2 presidential campaigns, 2004, 2008. And I would have been a multimillionaire had I followed any of the paths of the David Axelrods and those types who end up inside the system lobbying $1 million a year, sitting in their cushy thing connected to everybody. I did the exact opposite. Everywhere I went was always, can I work for a progressive? Now, Hillary 2016 was where all of this stems from. I became a ferocious Hillary Clinton advocate. Once again, I apologize for how sort of aggressive I was about it. I thought, first woman president, nobody get in the way, representation matters. That's the most important thing right now because of women's rights. It was an issue to me. Of course, looking back now, to overlook, the stuff she did in Libya and just the war hawkery and all the other aspects of what she represented as part of the establishment that was antithetical to my values, I was just plain wrong to prioritize one fact of representation that she would, finally break that glass ceiling. So the soul searching I did was, okay, how can you go so sort of into this intense advocacy and sort of lose your soul? People do that type of it. People make mistakes. It's like, you try your best in the moment to do what you think is right. Republicans right now who are doing what they're doing think they're right. People who criticize Republicans who are Democrats and liberals, they think they're right. I have all my Democratic and liberal friends, including some Bernie friends. It's like, what are you doing, Peter, working for Cornel West? You're going to re-elect Trump. And they think they're right. But in my heart, I've come to believe that they're wrong. And the moral thing to do is to break this duopoly once and for all. And so that's sort of the trajectory. There was a year in which I was a fierce Hillary advocate, alienated a lot of people, for which I have tried to make amends for 7 years now. And I understand, some of that will never really, some people will continue to always be suspicious of me and not be good with me. And I accept that with an open heart, because they have that right. I can't tell somebody like me, but I can certainly tell you I've never ever worked for a major corporation, an oil company. I've never ever worked or voted for a Republican. I was a Democrat, thinking Democrats are marginally better, so let's work for Democrats. I'm no longer there. As of 2020, I'm no longer there. And if I may, and thanks for giving the space to explain this, may I speak about the Marianne Williamson campaign? Would that be okay?
We'll get to that in just a second.
Because I want to explain that that's a Democratic campaign. So if we can address that at some point, it would be great.
Absolutely. But I want to talk a little bit about the Hillary Clinton campaign. A lot of us that are viewers of the show and in this space came from that Bernie Sanders movement. Now, we have many criticisms of Bernie Sanders today. Don't get me wrong. We have several. Most of us are not supportive of Bernie Sanders anymore. We see what he really has become. But during that time, we felt like we really had a lot of energy to really implement some type of change in this country. As Bernie said, like a political revolution. During that campaign, when you were working with the Hillary campaign, there was the Bernie bro narrative that was established. A lot of us were called sexist because we didn't support Hillary Clinton. There was also the issue of Correct the Record, which was that Bernie Sanders troll farm. Bernie Sanders Facebook pages were shut down. And a lot of people have asked why. I did ask my audience before this interview a couple of days ago. I asked them if they would be interested in me interviewing you to get these answers from you. And there's a lot of frustration there because we looked at the energy that we had surrounding that campaign, and we felt like a lot of the smears that came from the Hillary Clinton camp really destroyed what could have been more of a larger movement had it not been for those smears. So one of the questions that came my way, what was your involvement in those things that I mentioned, the Bernie bro narrative, the sexism remarks, and the Correct the Record?
Okay, I will answer you very directly on each one. I openly at the time rejected the term Bernie bro. I thought it was dismissive. I thought it was disgusting. I never used it. Maybe in a tweet where I said, don't use Bernie bro. I was against that term. I thought it was really, really just a way to paint with too broad a brush. It was, I think, disrespectful to especially women of color who supported Bernie, as though only white males supported Bernie Sanders. I did not push that narrative at all. And in fact, I rejected the narrative both internally and publicly. You'll probably find some commentary where I say I don't like using that terminology, number one. Number two, my association with David Brock, who it was not a very pleasant one in the end, because we know who David Brock is, but he had a media property called Blue Nation Review that somebody had started years ago, and he said, well, I purchased it. I said, okay, I'll run a media company and I'll say all these positive things about Hillary Clinton, right? But it turned into a lot of criticism of Bernie Sanders. And again, for which I regret deeply, but I had nothing to do with any troll farms. I just don't operate that way, Sabby. I'm not, for me, I come from a tradition in Lebanon where you're very, very straightforward. You're very honest. You're very blunt. A lot of people criticize me for being overeager and very real and direct, but that's just who I am. But I don't smear people. I was just like, what are you doing? We have to elect the first woman president. She's this amazing, whatever, it's too much, right? It's too much. But I was not involved in anything regarding smearing people or backroom stuff. I was basically running a media company and writing articles. So I was basically a CEO of a media company. I hired a bunch of writers, some of whom you all still know, and we just wrote a lot of material. Then I sort of turned that into an anti-Trump thing. And even the New York Times was commenting about, I kept starting anti-Trump hashtags, and I was doing a lot of videos, was getting millions of views that were anti-Trump. So that was my association then. I was not involved in Hillary Clinton's campaign. I had nothing to do with their strategy whatsoever. I don't know if I ever had a conversation with anybody in the campaign during that entire cycle. I'm not sure they really liked me. I was not, I was an outsider. If you look, there are some comments about, they didn't really like working with me, and I guarantee you they don't like me now. So the answer is unequivocally no. I don't engage in smears. I would not have a 25-year career if I were doing dirty tricks behind the scenes. I'm very upfront about what I believe, as I am being with you right now.
Well, I did see on Twitter, I do remember seeing on Twitter that there were tweets from you about Bernie bros being sexist, about us being sexist, though. I do remember that.
I may have said, I don't believe if I used the term Bernie bro, but I certainly, maybe towards the very end, but it was a term that I know that I wrote at the time. It's a term I don't like using. However, I did definitely use the sexism argument, and in the belief that if you're blocking the election of the first woman president, and it was a wrong argument. But I want to say something more to this, Sabby. A lot of the criticism of me, almost all of it boils down to you were a fierce Hillary Clinton advocate and you were mean when you did it. Yes, 100%. That is 100% true. I was a very, very fierce Hillary Clinton advocate. I don't know. 7 years of apologies. I can continue to apologize, and I will, because I was wrong, and I contributed to a bad environment, and I caused damage. I single-handedly did not stop Bernie Sanders from winning. I wasn't even in Hillary Clinton's campaign. That was a campaign between two candidates, but I was out there very vocal. So again, yes, I did say some of those things. You're correct about that.
Okay, let's move into Marianne Williamson's campaign. So this year you were the campaign manager for Marianne Williamson 2024. There was a tweet that you put out where you announced that you were actually stepping down from that campaign. And that caused quite a buzz because it wasn't just you. There was also another staff member that said that they were Jason Call. He said he was stepping down too, although I think he's also running a campaign himself. So I think there was some bandwidth issues there. But could you please explain to everyone, because there's a lot of rumors. There was an article that was written by Jen Dees. We discussed it on this show about some of the treatment of the staff members and the volunteers with Marianne Williamson's campaign. I know in your tweet you mentioned that you were having to leave the campaign to take care of your parents. I guess they were ailing at that point in time. But a lot of people have assume that it's more than that because of all the other information that's come out about Marianne's campaign. So I want to give you the opportunity to explain why did you decide to leave that campaign?
Yeah, may I say why I decided to join it as well, because I think that'll provide some context. Okay, so when I joined Marianne's campaign, there was nobody else who had declared. Certainly Cornel West had not, and certainly Robert Kennedy Jr. had not, and Biden had not. I had made a vow that I was going to do everything I could to shake up the system this time and to not let the duopoly just decide who we were getting. And I've been very vocal about it, trying to push Biden out of the race. I have privately and publicly encouraged both Marianne Williamson, and I'm going to be very slow and crystal clear about this, and Bobby Kennedy Jr. to run as independents, not because I support them or don't support them. This is, for me, was all about a mission for it to actually have democracy. You know, the Democrats were saving democracy. You're not saving. First of all, what democracy are you saving? Second of all, you're kicking Greens off the ballot. You're squelching any sort of opportunity for an actual primary. So for me, when I joined that campaign in 2021, I think I sent you this tweet. I don't know if maybe you can put it up or share it with your viewers. In 2021, I publicly told Marianne Williamson in an exchange on Twitter, I'm supporting third parties and independent candidates. Marianne hired me knowing that was my position. And I encouraged her to do it, both in the campaign, and I encouraged her to do it when I left the campaign.
One second, Peter. Sorry to interrupt, but I found that, and I do want to have a question really quick before you go on. So this is the tweet that Peter is referring to, calling on Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and Marianne Williamson, run as independents, time to stop the farce that the Democratic primary is democratic. So this was May 25th of 2023. So just so people are clear and understand that, when you joined that campaign, your intention was to get them to run, or to get her and to also get RFK Jr. to break away and run as an independent.
I believe that was the right thing. I have to be careful, not because I have an NDA. Marianne Williamson released me from my NDA, but because I'm a professional and I don't talk shit, excuse my language, about people I've worked with, whether I agree with them or not. So I'm not here to trash Marianne Williamson. And the issue with my mother. So here's what happened. At the time that Marianne called me and told me I'm running and I need a campaign manager, I was down in Florida where my mother was in hospice care. She's still okay, thank God, a year later. But my mother was very, very sick in hospice care. And then at the same time, Leela, my wife, her mother received a terminal diagnosis, and also in Florida. So we were down there taking care of our parents, and Marianne called. I thought, okay, this is an opportunity for me to do what I thought. Maybe run and do a dirty break. Maybe she'll decide to run as an independent. Whatever we do, we're going to put some fear into the system, into the coronation of Joe Biden. I thought, I'm trying to be strategic here. Nobody else was running. I had no idea Cornel West was going to run. I certainly, this is my dream to be working with Cornel West. So my strategic thinking was shake up the system however you can shake it up. Over the years, Sabby, and I said this very publicly, there have been occasions, including my friend Jason Cole, who's now running as a Green, in which I will help a very progressive Democrat with a good platform. Her platform on Ukraine is the opposite of how I feel. We should not be sending billions of dollars to Ukraine right now. The United States has, I believe Putin's actions are imperialistic. However, I believe the United States has provoked, and NATO has provoked every step of the way. They have escalated, provoked. They could have been peacemakers. They are sending money there to waste the lives of the Ukrainian people just to enrich the military-industrial complex. It is unbelievably unethical. They are sending cluster bombs, which 40 years from now, and I am a child of war, will be killing Ukrainian children. Now they're sending depleted uranium weapons. So my position on Ukraine is radically different from Marianne Williamson. However, again, I felt, okay, strategically, let's shake this up. If she runs an independent, then I, had a conversation with Bobby Kennedy Jr. Again, I can't reveal the details of conversations. It would not be correct. I can say that I spoke to someone and I tweeted that, but I'm not going to reveal what we said and what they said. But I have encouraged them both, run Indy. Enough of this Democratic Party. This Democratic Party is anti-democratic. And, I had an interview with a mainstream reporter today who could not believe that I was saying Democrats are the same threat to democracy as Republicans. And the reporter was saying, but January 6th. I said, Barack Obama called every candidate to drop out of the race. If that's not tampering with an election, Bernie was winning and Buttigieg was doing well. I've never seen in all my years somebody like Buttigieg, close to winning one of the caucuses or primaries, just dropping out. So that was effectively, that's rigging, right? That's anti-democratic. So from my standpoint, the Marianne experience, and then about a month into it, it became so stressful to the point my blood pressure was up like 20 points. And my wife turned to me and said, Peter, you can't take care of your mom, we can't take care of our parents, and you're dealing with a very stressful situation here. I restructured the campaign. There was a lot of internal stuff that was difficult to do. Campaign management is not easy. And I thought, you know what, I have to choose my mom or I choose the Marianne Williamson campaign. I'm choosing my mom, right? And so I just said I have to leave. So there was nothing deceptive about it. Was there more going on? Of course. Did I have some strategic thinking of, because that tweet encouraging her was 10 days after I left. So I 100 still to this day think Marianne Williamson and Robert Kennedy should run as independents. The Democratic primary is a farce right now. It's an absolute farce. There's nothing democratic about it. And I am absolutely ecstatic to be working. And I want to speak about Cornel West for 1 minute. This man is an intellectual giant. Okay, he's one of the legends of our time. 100 years from now, he will be looked back on the way that James Baldwin is. All right, and other leaders like that. He's a moral leader. The notion that Peter Daou, some refugee from Lebanon, house music producer, is going to somehow change the ethics or the morals of a man of his intellectual and moral stature is frankly insulting to Cornel West, and I reject it outright. I'm an operator. I operate. Campaign management is like building a car. I make sure the tires work. I make sure the engine is working. I make sure the machine works so it gets Cornel West to the destination. But I really, really, really want to outright reject this notion that somehow Jill Stein, Cornel West, Ajamul Baraka, people, Chris Hedges, these are people I've always respected. You saw that tweet from Jill, from me 11 years ago, that somehow all these people are going to take what Peter Daou tells them and completely change their morals and ethics. It is laughable on its face. I respect the criticism, but there's a limit to which this becomes, I believe, insulting to Dr. West, and I just want to reject that wholeheartedly, Sabby. I think we have to stand on principle here. This man is a gift to American politics. He's a moral leader. He's a man of deep faith and deep intellectual rigor. And it's an honor for me to even be in his presence, let alone running his campaign. And I just want to, I can't say enough, and I invite everybody to join and support Cornel West's campaign, please. And this is why I have the poster behind me. This is way more important than who the campaign manager is. This is shaking up the system and challenging the duopoly in a way that no other individual will be able to do or has been able to do. It's historic. Sorry about the rant, but I wanted to get it out there.
I think the thing is I hear what you're saying. I think the thing is, after Bernie and after the squad, a lot of us were burned by Bernie Sanders and the squad. So the threshold this time around is so much higher. I played a video on the show a couple of nights ago where Jill Stein actually crashed the DNC convention. I don't know if you remember that, but in 2016, she crashed the DNC convention, and someone was interviewing her as they were walking by, and she was talking about the neoliberalism and the fascism. And she was comparing Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton. And I played that video for my audience to see, just as a reminder, Jill Stein used those same terms, just like Cornel West did. And I asked them, we did a call in after, and I asked them, like, so why is it such problematic now? And what my viewers told me is because things are so much different now, because we were burned by Bernie Sanders and the squad. So they're less trusting now than they were a couple of years ago. So I think, plus now we've had a Biden and a Trump, right? So just to give you some perspective, but I think one of the questions that I have going into the Marianne Williamson campaign, and please correct me if I'm wrong here. If I remember correctly, in 2020, you voted Green, correct? Or you supported?
I supported Green? Hawkins, absolutely. Yeah, I was very vocal Green supporter at the time. And also, the continuation of that was as soon as Dr. West announced at the very beginning, and I've tweeted about this. So again, I'm not revealing anything that is proprietary or private. I helped Jill Stein and other friends in the Green Party make the transition from the People's Party to the Green Party, because I thought that was the right thing to do. I was working behind the scenes, but I was not advising Dr. West. And I did that behind the scenes with Jill Stein, and I let it be. I had one meeting with Dr. West and his beautiful wife, and they're both such wonderful souls. These are deeply, deeply, to me, some of the most ethical and kind and humble and generous people I have ever worked with in my life. And we had one meeting, nice to meet you. And I think I tweeted, I finally got called Brother Peter by Dr. West. This was like a big moment for me in my life. Didn't hear a word. 5 days ago, I got a phone call, and Dr. West said, I'd like you to be the campaign manager. I said, it's my honor. I've been waiting this whole time. I wasn't going to do any other work until I knew if there was an opportunity here, because this would be the work of a lifetime. This is the culmination of my whole life. So, that's basically how it unfolded step by step, and now I find myself here with an unbelievable opportunity to do something that has not been done before. But Sabby, can I just talk for a minute about campaign management? Because I think there's a lot of misunderstanding that anybody can be a campaign manager. I'm a campaign professional the way, and I don't, not to elevate myself at all, but the way, say, an NFL player plays football, right? That's what they do. They're a football player. Now, there are many great NFL players or basketball players who never get the ring. They never get the championship ring, but they're still good at what they do, and they contribute. No, I have not won the White House. You can count on your hand how many advisors have won the White House. I've worked on races like John Kerry's in the primary that won the primary and then lost the general election after all the shenanigans in Ohio. I've worked with campaigns that lost. And I've mainly worked with insurgent progressive campaigns. Well, you don't know how to win. I know how a campaign operates at the highest levels with a huge operation. I would like to bring that knowledge and experience to Dr. West because, I keep saying, Dr. West and I are jazz lovers. So I said, Dr. West, you got, McCoy Tyner, Jimmy Garrison, Elvin Jones, and John Coltrane, one of the greatest quartets in history. Well, imagine McCoy Tyner's piano is completely out of tune. Now, he'll still sound good, but it's going to make it a little bit funky. It's going to be a little bit off, right? The genius of them is how perfectly they work together. A good campaign works like a symphony orchestra, like a jazz band, like a Miles Davis quintet, and my job is to just make sure that happens. My job is not to tell Cornel West what to believe because that man's beliefs are so far beyond what I've ever achieved in my life. I follow Cornel West. Cornel West does not follow me. Do we talk? Of course we talk. My job is simply to make sure the bills are paid, that everybody, and I have to know everybody's role, Sabby. I need to know what the finance team does. I need to know what the field team does. I need to know what the graphics team does. I need to know technology, email. There's a huge amount of knowledge that goes into building a campaign. And it is very hard to find people who were blessed enough to have my experience who will work for the Green Party. They just won't do it because they get blacklisted. And I don't care. Because I've never been in it for the money. I'm in it for the cause and the mission. Have I made mistakes in the past? Absolutely. And have I said things that I regret? Absolutely. But I've always been for the cause of the people that Dr. West is here for because he always focuses on the people. I tell him, look, we're not here to serve the critics. We're here to serve the people who are oppressed by the system. The critics we will take as Christian men, I will take that to heart. I will listen. I will treat it with forgiveness and love and humility. But I'm here to serve the people that Dr. West has spent his lifetime fighting for. And again, thank you for giving me the space to express myself. I really appreciate the time you're giving me to open up my heart and let you know who I am as a person.
So the reason why I asked if you supported the Green Party in 2020, because I remember people tweeting about that you did support Howie Hawkins in 2020. The reason why I asked that question is because if you were supporting the Green Party in 2020, why then go to work in a Democrat campaign in 2024? Why not wait and go to a Green Party campaign? And I asked that question because the Green Party runs a presidential candidate every presidential election cycle. So why the pivot from the Green back to the Democratic Party? And now you're going into the Green Party again.
Yeah, it's a fair question, but as I tried to explain, and I don't want to repeat myself because I don't want to take time from the rest of your show. As I expressed, my overall thinking was I did not know Dr. West was going to run. My overall thinking was shake things up. Williamson was the only campaign that had declared at the time, and I thought there was a possibility for a dirty break or an independent run. And I thought strategically that was the correct thing. I did not work for that campaign because it was a Democratic campaign. But I have said, Sabby, including with my friend Jason Call last cycle, this cycle he's agreed, I will sometimes work with a very progressive or a Democratic socialist who has a very strong platform, even if they're inside the party, because that way at least I'm shaking up the system. But clearly after a month, it was clear to me that this was not a fit. I tried to do something strategic in terms of shaking things up. That was my aim. My aim was not elect Democrats. Let me make you a vow right now. And I put it up, and this is a vow from me, also from the campaign, because I posted up on behalf of me and Dr. West. We are not sheep herding anyone into the Democratic Party. Listen to me carefully. We are going to the end. Dr. West is getting on the ballot. If we are so blessed and fortunate to get the nomination of the Green Party, because I want to approach the Green Party with a total humility. We are seeking the nomination. We have not earned the nomination yet. So from our perspective, we are trying to get the nomination of the Green Party, trying to get on the ballot in all the states, and trying to, and intending 100%. There will not be, oh, you know what, we're going to elect Trump or Republicans, so you know what, dropping out and you go vote for the Democrat. Tell you right now, this is not what this is about. This campaign is about once and for all challenging the system with a man of great intellectual and moral stature who is far better than any candidate presidentially that I can think of, certainly in my lifetime, and I don't know historically, one of the greatest presidential candidates we've ever had. The challenge, Sabby, will be incredibly hard because the system will try to crush us every step of the way. Oh, you're a spoiler. Oh, you're going to elect Trump. Oh, you're going to help the fascists, on and on and on and on. I have blinders on. I'm going to help build this machine with everything I have, and we are going to go and challenge the system. And that's a promise that I give you.
I think a lot of us agree with Dr. West's policies, and a lot of us love Dr. West. I think the concern, though, is the pivot from you. So again, as I said earlier in the show, is that people are less trusting this time around because of what happened with Bernie Sanders and with the squad members as well. So I know you said that, you're part of this campaign now, but sometimes you would work with progressive members to shake things up. While you are now campaign manager for the Dr. West campaign in the Green Party, are you going to be working with any Democrat progressive candidates?
No, absolutely not. I am 100% campaign manager. I am 100% dedicated to the Green Party. Look, Sabby, I've done a lot of soul searching about what is the right way. I did spend a lot of time thinking about just independent runs, because the Constitution provides for independents to run, and yet the duopoly has made sure that we have violated the constitutional principle in the 14th Amendment that we have the right to run parties and vote for people. George Washington, I hate quoting slaveholders, and that's how I feel about the founders. But just from a historical perspective, in his farewell address, railed against the party system and against this idea that two parties would, the parties would just start like becoming dominant over everything. I will absolutely not, this is it, is the Green Party. I'm working with Dr. West to seek the nomination for the Green Party because I believe the Green Party is the future for America and for the world. I mean, you talk about the Green New Deal. You talk about, this is my Jill Stein tweet from 10 years ago. This is the party that has the possibility to make the world no longer red, blue, but red, blue, green. And it will transform possibilities for people. So absolutely, I will not be working with any Democrat. I am 1000% in for Dr. West. This is my job, and I will be there till the very last day. And as long as he needs me to serve him, I will be here.
So one of the things that Dr. West is really passionate about, even before he started this campaign, is the rights of Palestinian people, right? So we know that he was denied tenure from Harvard because of his position in reference to Israel and Palestine. So he, in my opinion, has been right on that issue, even when it was not popular to do so. I feel like it's more popular for people to do that now. One of the things that has come up has been your involvement with the IDF. And I do want to ask about that because I know that is one of the pressing questions that's come from people. In 2015, there was a discussion between you and Rania Khalek in reference to that, where she said, "What terrorists did you face in Beirut? Palestinian women and children in Sabra and Shatila?" And you responded, "And I'm sure you know the history of the Lebanese war involves atrocities by all sides and by major powers." And then on this piece here, Rania said the guy who started the hashtag Hillary Men was apparently a Lebanese phalangist. They were murderous fascists. And down here, I noticed that you said they trained all high school boys and then took them to camps. I was a child doing Sabra/Shatila years before. I want to talk about your experience with this because
absolutely
the Palestinian people, like that's a big, and I've said this to about every candidate that's running, it's a big red flag for me, depending on their position in reference to Israel and Palestine. Obviously, you're not the candidate, but you're managing Dr. West's campaign, and we know how he feels about the Palestinian people. Could you talk a little bit about your involvement with the IDF and how did this actually work in this discussion that you had with Rania?
Yes, I'd be happy to clear this up. I have always supported the Palestinian people, some of the most brutally oppressed people on this planet. You will not find a single tweet or comment where you see me supporting Israel's apartheid or criticizing the Palestinian people. In fact, one of those tweets that Rania, and by the way, I think Rania was right to call me out on that. We had an exchange. We now follow each other online. I respect her for calling me out on that she was perfectly entitled to do so. The original tweet that generated this whole conversation, and Sabby, I believe I sent it to you, was me defending Palestinian children from Israel slaughtering them. Then some right-winger whose account has now been deleted, and this is where things get taken out of context, okay? I want to state this unequivocally. I am 100% opposed to Israel's brutal oppression of the Palestinian people. These are people who have been treated, it's absolutely crimes against humanity how they are being treated, and I've always believed this, always. And on my mother's side, I'm Jewish. I'm Christian on my dad's side. So I say this as someone with a Jewish background as well. Okay, and this is something that's unacceptable to the world, and we should not be sending money to fund this. Okay, and I've been crystal clear about this for years. Those tweets, when I was 14 years old, Sabby, I was in the Christian part of Lebanon, and Lebanon is sectarian and divided in that way. And during that war, the Lebanese forces was the militia that was fighting on the Christian side. At 14 years old, as a high schooler, I was in high school early, they came to our school and they began doing 2 to 3 hours of mandatory training, mandatory conscription after class, whether or not we had work to do, whether our parents disagreed. It was mandatory training. It lasted 2 or 3 years until I was about 17. And during that time, I was not trained by the IDF at all. The tweet I was trying to say is that the IDF and the US government as well was arming and training the Christians because they were fighting the Syrians and other. It was geopolitical forces meddling in the country, including Israel, the United States, others as well, right? So I was trained against my will. I was taken to a camp. My parents tried to pull every political string to get me out of the country, arguing that I'm a US citizen and I cannot serve in another military. They would not let me leave the country. For 2 years, I was not allowed to leave Lebanon. My passport was confiscated. I could not leave. And eventually my father, who had some political connections in Lebanon, got me out. I went back once only to Lebanon since then. I saw my dad before he died. Once. Excuse me.
It's okay. Take your time.
I've not harmed a soul in my life. And I condemn those massacres in Sabra and Shatila. Rania was correct to call me out, but I was just being blustery with some right-wingers said, what do you know about the military? What experience do you have? Well, I was trained by the Lebanese forces and the IDF was training. So it was me being a blustery guy, just basically saying, yeah, I have more military experience than you do. I challenge anyone to find a single tweet in which I have criticized Palestinians or supported Israel, because that is not in my heart. I, with Dr. West, 100% am behind the Palestinian people and their suffering. And that's crystal clear. So those tweets, again, looking back now as being sort of the Lebanese guy, like I had military experience. I was fighting with right-wingers online at the time. And they're all about, oh, you don't know how to touch a gun. You don't know how to do this or that. Well, yeah, I sure do, because I was trained to do so. And that's it in a nutshell, Sabrina. I'm crystal clear on my ethics on that issue. And I say it having lived in that region. And it pains me greatly. The Sabra and Shatila massacres were monstrous, hideous, fascist acts that are condemnable. I condemned them years ago. There's an article about me in the New Republic in which the reporter dug very deeply. He said there's not a shred of evidence that I was ever involved in anything like that. And in fact, I never was involved, and I condemn it from the absolute bottom of my heart. I do understand people reading those tweets having questions. I think it's absolutely fair for you to ask it. I think Rania was absolutely right to ask me and confront me. I respect her for doing so. And I believe like we've crossed the threshold of, I think, being more friendly toward one another, and I respect her greatly.
Here's the tweet you were referring to, Peter. No matter our political and ideological proclivities, can we all agree it's a terrible thing to kill children? Hashtag Gaza, hashtag Israel. And that was August 1st, 2014.
And then if you scroll down is the tweet where somebody confronted me. And then I say, I grew up in the Beirut. This person was challenging me. What do you know about the region? What do you know about military stuff? And my response was that response. But my original comment was defending Palestinian children from Israel murdering them. So you could see my heart where it was in 2014. I had nothing to prove to anybody. I didn't know Dr. West or anything. This is me, 9 years ago, defending Palestinian children against Israel's aggression. And that's where I am on the issue. I've been crystal clear on the issue. I cannot help, Sabby, that I was a child conscript. I don't want to call myself a victim. I was the recipient of a militia that was training every boy there. And I was on the receiving end of it. It was terrifying. They used live ammunition. There were training sessions in which they would just throw grenades. Each trainer had a quota of how many boys he could kill in the training. This was raw war. It was absolutely terrifying. And I lived through absolute hell. If I may just tell very quickly, do I have 1 minute to just tell you one story of what the experience of Beirut was like? Or if you don't have
sure,
time.
You have plenty of time. Just really quick, I want to tell everyone, apparently this account that responded to you, apparently that account was suspended. So I don't know what they said, but something was suspended there.
Yeah.
But yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so again, my experience of there's an example. There was and when I was telling Rania that there were atrocities on all sides, the Sabran Shatila massacres were some of the most hideous massacres in the past, 50, 60 years ever. Horrible, women and children. It was one of the most condemnable acts of violence, imaginable. Now, but when I was saying there are other atrocities too, it was carnage. They were just bombing residential areas. Like they would take these, what they call grad missiles, these huge missiles, and just lob them into buildings. And I was on the receiving end of that stuff. We would count down as a family with all my brothers and sisters sitting in hallways, how many seconds until the projectile would hit the building or hit near us. If we heard the explosion, we were alive. If we didn't hear it, we were dead. It was that every night. There was one time I went to a supermarket where there was a spate of car bombings of supermarkets. Let's kill 250 people and bomb a supermarket. I'm driving to the market. I'm 15, 16 years old. I get 1 minute away from the supermarket, the biggest market in that area. And my car jumps up like 5 feet off the ground with this massive explosion. What happened was the car bomber was about 4 cars ahead of me, and it detonated before he got to the market. I was headed to the market where this car bomber was headed to just blow it to smithereens. I get out of my car completely rattled. His car's on fire. Sorry, trigger warning here because I'm going to be graphic. Half his body was on one side of the street. The other half, he had been blown just to bits. The other half was on the other side of the street. And I'm sitting here looking over this burning car and this man's body split in half. This was my day-to-day, Sabby. It has left me with PTSD. I have severe hypervigilance. In other words, I worry about my loved ones far more than an average person does because you fear you're going to die at any given moment, and it has left scars. And this is why I feel like our sending billions of dollars to use Ukrainian children as fodder, are sending money, and this is coming from Democrats, to go and Dr. West has spoken out about this as well. Arming Saudis to kill Yemeni children. When children suffer like that, it hits me deep in my heart because I lived that. So, a lot of my politics to people to understand me is because I came from a place where I have deep scars from that war. And again, thank you for letting me express that. And so people can understand, how my mind works.
So when you were talking about, because that was one of the things I think that rubbed people the wrong way, when you were talking about atrocities on both sides, you were talking about the civilian casualties.
I was talking about the widespread attacks on civilians. That was a war in which it was just basically outright war on civilians everywhere. But I want to separate that, and I think I shouldn't have conflated it with Rania during those conversations. I was defending myself. People get defensive online. Everybody thinks they're right. Those tweets weren't correct, and I can understand why people read this and so why some IDF, you're Zionist. I mean, I'm the exact opposite of that. As somebody of the Jewish background, I have been incredibly, critical of Israel's brutality toward the Palestinian people. So, but I get it. Look, I get it. I accept the criticisms, and I'm deeply grateful to you for giving me the opportunity to just talk about it. I want to come back to one thing, though. Dr. West, as you have said, has been unequivocal in support of his Palestinian brothers and sisters. He has been. This is what's great about Cornel West, is that he just is so unwavering in his moral values, and that's why I keep coming back to, I'm not going to change the Cornel West's morals. I'm not going to tell him what to think. I'm not going to change his mind. I'm going to learn from this man, and I'm going to serve this man with dignity and humility, but I sure as hell am not going to change who he is. And I think we all have a lot to learn from him, Sabby. I mean, not many people of that intellectual caliber and moral caliber exist in our country and are willing to get into the political fray, because he's going to get a lot of attacks. Let me tell you, the type of venom and just incoming fire, metaphorically speaking, that's going to come at Cornel West is going to be intense. And I beg of all of you who believe in the cause, please, I am just the operator of the campaign, like I'm running a car, like I'm just part of the band. Cornel West is the candidate. He is the man who is taking an exceptionally bold stance to put himself out there, and we need to come together. I think of a Jimmy Dore, who really just has disliked me for years, and I get it in those days. During his exchange with Dr. West, I'm going to listen to Dr. West, and I'm going to hear what he has to say and understand that he is the one teaching us. We're not teaching him. But at the same time, with Force the Vote, I thought Jimmy was right on Force the Vote. Yeah, he doesn't like me. I get it. He's never going to like me. But I was actually, if you go back and look at my tweets, I supported Force the Vote because I'm thinking, wait a minute, the Squad and Bernie, didn't you promise us Medicare for all? Didn't you run on that? and now suddenly you're not even going to bring it to the floor? You're not going to even talk about it? I mean, the wholesale sort of sellout of who we thought there. What I'm saying is the only flaw in it is that we should never support Nancy Pelosi. Nancy Pelosi, to me, is that like a Mitch McConnell. This is a person who has enriched herself to the tune of $120 million by the system. You know, when Democrats say, oh, Democrats are better than Republicans, look at Nancy Pelosi, just the way look at Mitch McConnell, just all these people are getting enriched by the oligarchy. And so there's nuance here, Sabby. You know, like people can disagree, but overall, we're part of a mission here. And Dr. West is our leader for this mission, and we must come together. We must come together. We're not going to get another opportunity like this. These don't come along. I've been doing this 25 years. I've never seen such an opportunity to really shake up the system properly. So I encourage everyone to look past the momentary kerfuffles that happen, eyes on the prize. And that's what Dr. West always says.
So I want to talk a little bit about, and I showed everyone the force to vote thing. You tweeted that December 21st of 2020, force to vote was a good idea. I want to talk a little bit about Dr. West's campaign. One of the things that I did ask him when he came onto the show is this campaign going to be more of a movement, so to speak? And so I think a lot of people who are supporting Dr. West are looking forward to some type of movement. Is there any type of strategy in place for that? I did see really quick. I did see that Dr. West is speaking at the Peace in Ukraine rally in DC October 3rd. I did advertise that event on the show the other night.
Right.
So I did see that. But in reference to a strategy of building a movement, what is the plan there?
Okay, that's an excellent question. I'm glad we're coming to the campaign. So there are pieces to this puzzle, how you build it, right? And I keep using the analogy of a car. You know, if one part of the engine isn't working, this car is not going to run. My first task with Dr. West is to build an efficient, strong campaign structure, one that can actually carry him forward. This is 100% going to be a movement-driven campaign because this is the only campaign you can run for the Green Party and for Dr. West. The system is going to block us at every turn. The propaganda, you know, I saw somebody do a montage of how many times spoiler was used in mainstream corporate media. Is he a spoiler? Is he a spoiler? This is propaganda techniques. This is not some accidental question. He will be blocked at every step. And the way we overcome that is building a movement. Now, movement building, sounds, it's a term that's used a lot, but it's an exceptionally difficult thing to do because a movement is something that groundswell from the bottom up. So for me, I need to partner up with the organizers, the ground organizers. I'm a national politics guy, right? My job is to make sure all the pieces are working together. But I want to invite and bring on board on the ground organizers. I think of people, I'm thinking of RBN, for example. I think of Afeni, I think of Rome. I think of people out there on the streets helping people, right? And there are so many amazing organizers locally. Those are the people I am in awe of. As a national politics guy, I look to them. So the answer to your question is 100%. This has to be movement driven. Dr. West himself is such an appealing figure and will bring people to him. But this is not something where I just turn on, and I'm not saying you're saying this. I don't want to be disrespectful in any way because it's the correct question. I can't just turn on the movement switch, right? There are so many pieces that need to be put into place. The right email program, the right digital program, the right ground game, the right staff, the right finances, the right fundraising. It is a very complex operation, Sabby. A presidential campaign has so many moving parts. It's like one of those Swiss watches where one thing cannot go wrong. When we put this structure in place in the immediate days, we are going to bring on board more and more organizers and spread out on the ground. And we will work to build this as a movement. I cannot make promises. The first thing I told Dr. West, I cannot promise you'll increase 1% in the polls if I join your campaign. But I will promise you this campaign will operate at the highest levels of excellence, and we will operate with honesty and dignity and transparency. That's what I can promise. But yes, Abby, we need to build a movement, and we need everybody's help. Your audience, and even the people criticizing me and criticizing Dr. West, we need them. We need each of them. We're in this together because the Democratic Party will attempt to crush us even more than the Republican Party will attempt to crush us. They're out there kicking Greens off the ballot. Okay, so there's a big challenge ahead of us, and I'm just like 100% focused. My focus is bring this to the ultimate fruition that we can bring it to the maximum excellence and really talking to the people that he centers. I hope that answers your question. It's a short answer is yes. It has to be a movement.
So one of the key things that we like to talk about a lot on this show are demands. Like when you have a movement, you have to have a set of demands. Bernie Sanders, I think if you look back at his political campaigns, everybody knows Medicare for all, right?
Yep.
What would you say is going to be the key topic or the key item here in reference to this campaign and this movement, so to speak? What would you say if you had to say the top 2 or 3 issues that you were going to focus on for this campaign? What would those be? And is there a set of demands?
Okay, the demands and the more nuances of the message I want to leave to Dr. West. I'm an operations person. It's not, I have my personal beliefs and I've shared some with you, but I'm not the policy person. However, let me identify 2 issues right away. The issue of the oppression through this capitalist system of tens upon tens of millions of people, both racial oppression as well, and deep inequality. The people who are forgotten. These are the people Dr. West has always spoken to and about. In other words, centering the people that no duopoly campaign will ever center and focus on. And that's broad, but it is representing and speaking, uplifting the people who are forgotten by the system. As I said, I was doing an interview with a mainstream reporter. I said, the vast majority of people are suffering. He said, what do you mean most people are suffering? I said, do you have any idea what it's like for the working class to survive in this country, to get medical care, to afford food? So the forgotten people. Another major one, critically important, the climate issue. Now, Dr. West on climate is about 500 steps ahead from what any Democrat or Republican would ever say. The Democrats are equally, if not worse, because under Joe Biden, we have had more oil drilling than under Trump. And this is one of the existential crises of our time, and we're running for the nomination of the Green Party. So I will tell you right now, the climate issue is going to be absolutely central to this campaign because it is one of the great threats of our time. But also the oppression of the people through this capitalist system, this oligarchy in which a few people are running away with everything, and the duopoly serves those people and builds the laws and the structure around them. And the people, the working class is completely forgotten. And those are the people. Can I say one more thing? I want to share one little thing with you about when Dr. West uses the term brothers and brothers and sisters. Some people think it's just a way he greets people, and it's an endearing part of how he addresses people. But there's a deep Christian background to why Dr. West says that. Dr. West approaches everyone. They're created in the image of God. They're a brother and sister created in the image of God. And this is with his opponents too and his critics. So when you'll hear Dr. West say brother this or sister that, this is coming from a place of deep humility and faith of looking at people as a collective of humanity. Now, that doesn't mean he won't vehemently disagree and fight for the cause he believes in, but I think that's something we should really think through very carefully about how to approach the situation. We are speaking to those who are the least able to fight for themselves. Those are the people we need to uplift. We don't want to, as the duopoly does, is just support the rich and the well-off and the billionaires and the big corporations. Our job is to completely flip that on its end. And it's going to challenge a lot of people, and it's going to cause a lot of consternation in the system, Sabby. This is not an easy thing to do, and it's very challenging to the entrenched powers. Believe me, that's why nobody wants to take my job with my experience, because you are literally going at the system head on. And it's something that requires a tremendous amount of faith to do and the vision of Dr. West. So I'm so happy that he's doing this and that we have this opportunity with him.
Yeah, I'm asking this because I was looking at a poll recently. It says the number one issue that Americans have right now is the economy. So in reference to demands and building a movement, is there any strategy around addressing the issues that Americans are facing in reference to the economy, such as the increasing inflation that we have right now? The grocery store prices are increasing. The child poverty rate actually doubled. That was reported recently as well. Is there anything?
Homelessness at record highs, suicide rate at record highs, 25% of adults not getting enough to eat, going hungry. A quarter of adults in America are going hungry. It is an astounding fact that this so-called greatest and richest country in the world, the deep economic misery people are facing. We will prioritize it, Sabby. I'm not going to talk about specific strategies to do it, but that economic pain and misery from this capitalist system is core. That's what I was saying before, like the people, to uplift the people. These are the forgotten people. It's essentially It's the working class. It's the people who are forgotten by the system and treated as fodder by the system. They're going to be centered. How we do it, with what messaging, what rallies. You saw his video about the UAW strike. Dr. West has always been on the front lines. He's put his body on the line for 40 years. He's going to keep doing that. And yes, we're going to focus it more and more and more. But Dr. West is not this is sort of campaign speak, but, you sort of message your candidate. You sort of tell them, say it this way or say it that way, and it will appeal to this. Democrats and Republicans will focus group, right? Or they'll dial test, or they'll poll. $50,000 poll just to see if somebody likes this, put your finger in the wind type of approach. This is not Dr. West. He has centered the same people, suffering people, his whole life. But how we bring that, Sabby, is an absolutely valid question. How are you going to turn that into a campaign? How are you going to appeal? How are you going to build a movement? These are huge challenges. They're not easy. I have no magic bullet where, I snap my fingers and everybody's going to see his message and flock to us. This is a grind every day. He's going to be out there on the front lines. He's going to be at marches. He's going to be at strikes. He's going to be talking to the people. And I believe if we do this right and we do it with a high level of sort of dedication and efficiency and integrity, I do believe this campaign will begin to take off. Once it takes off, watch out, because once people see, and this is not just for Democrats or Bernie supporters or leftists or libertarians, everybody. We want to make this campaign such that anybody that's affected, 100 million people in the 2 elections ago, 80 million people the last election did not vote. Eligible voters sat out. Why do you think they sat out? They sat out because they have nothing being given to them. Some are Republican or Republican leaning, some are Democrats, conservative, whatever they are. But there are tens upon tens of millions of people who are completely left out, disaffected, disillusioned by the system. We have a huge potential audience and voters and supporter base to go to. This is why we need the movement. And I welcome input and feedback. I've got a lot of DMs from people, a lot of comments. We're going to create the strategy around Dr. West's vision because he has the vision. But, ideas are welcome. This is collaborative. For leftists, this is a moment. For the Green Party, this is a moment. And I'm not going to let this moment be squandered if there's anything I can do about it. This is why I'm on your show right now. I saw a lot of this kerfuffle about me personally, because this is not about me. This is about Dr. West. And I thought, let me come address this stuff. I understand the criticisms. They're absolutely fair. People need to know me and see me. Let me look in your eyes and show you my commitment. Apologize for the mistakes I made, but let's start focusing on Dr. West. It's enough about me. I'm just a guy who does operations. We need to focus on the prize and on the candidate. And so thank you for going there with this right now.
Okay, so I have 2 more things, Peter. The first thing is there have been some concerns from people that there is a possibility, and I don't know for sure, but I'm asking you now, there's a possibility that Democrats are joining this campaign. And that also makes people worry, and they're concerned as well, because they feel like there could be some type of infiltration. And we've seen this happen in other political parties. I've seen it happen in organizing spaces as well. I'm not sure if you wanted to speak on that or not.
Absolutely, I do. Now, one of the things that we do need to remember, all of us came, a phrase I've heard, or maybe I made it up, I don't know. Nobody was born a Marxist, right? Everybody has a journey to get to where they got to. Mine has been very public, and along the way, I've done some stuff that I regret doing and has made people question. But my journey has been very, very, very direct. Further and further and further away. I became an independent in 2020, Sabby, and I was very vocal about why I did that, because I felt the Democratic Party was a party of the irredeemable, unethical hypocrites. Just on Joe Biden alone, if you look at some of the stuff he's done in terms of eight allegations of sexual misconduct or harassment, including videos of him groping girls on camera, and suddenly the Me Too movement just disappears. Like, wait a minute, it was Me Too when a Republican did it. So that type of deep sort of cognitive dissonance made me leave the party and support the Green Party. And that's when I became friendly with not just Jill Stein, but with many Greens, because I felt that was where the ethics was, with the Green Party, right? So in terms of Democrat, I am not a Democrat. This idea that, you hear words like mercenary, infiltrator, op, and all these words. You could not be more transparent than I am. So speaking for myself, and as I told you, mercenaries and ops, they sniff out the money. I'd be working for the MIC. I'd be working for oil companies. That's where the big money is. Ops don't go to the Green Party. This is where ops don't go. Now, are there going to be Democrats on the campaign? I think there are supporters who voted for Obama who was droning weddings. A lot of, not a lot, some of my critics are people who supported Barack Obama. And we know what Barack Obama did just in terms of immigration, the deporter in chief. So everybody comes to this from a journey. from my perspective, the team that has been put around Dr. West, the beauty of Dr. West and his family is that they have a real, they can sniff out the BS artists and the people who are there for the movement, right? The people that I have met on this campaign right now are some of the best people, talented people that I've ever worked with on campaigns before, dedicated to the cause, right? So this idea of infiltration, I see the problem of infiltration very differently, Sabby. I was warned early on, the attacks against Dr. West are not necessarily going to come from the right, and they're not necessarily going to come from the Democratic Party. They may come from places you don't expect them to come. And so that concerns me too. One of the reasons I'm here for solidarity and unity is what we don't want to happen is attacks on Dr. West from principled leftists. I'm not saying anybody's an op or anybody's planted or all that. I take criticism to heart. I believe you mean what you say and you have fair criticism. But we have to be very careful, because if the Democratic Party is going to infiltrate, what they're going to do is they're going to plant people on the left to go after Dr. West. And so that's the nefarious ways in which they work. So to me, it's not somebody's going to come to the campaign and convince Dr. West to become a different person. That's not how this stuff works. This stuff is shady. It's under the scenes. It's somebody who you think is your friend is now not your friend. It's somebody, the mainstream media, a reporter who's neutral. I had that experience today, suddenly pushing all these anti-West talking points to you and then pushing them in the mainstream media. It's going to be like a systemic way in which they try to stop him from every different direction. So I welcome if somebody worked for the Democratic Party and has become a dedicated Green. I'm one example of that, a dedicated independent. Great. If you're here for the cause and you really mean it from your heart, wonderful. So I don't really know how else to answer that. Like, I don't know if it's in reference to me or other possible people, but I promise you right now. Yeah.
Other possible people.
Yes, this is something we absolutely, look, we have to be very, very, very mindful of the fact of the level. I don't know how to stress this enough. At the end of that conversation with this reporter, and I know I keep coming back to this because it's one of the most astounding interviews, and I've done interviews for 25 years. At the end of the interview, he said, "Are you worried that something's going to happen to you and Dr. West?" And it sounded more like a threat than it sounded like a question. And this is from a major mainstream reporter. And I sort of was taken aback. I said, what are you asking me? And the message really, my wife was actually quite disturbed by it. It's like, what kind of a question is that for a reporter to ask you? So I don't think I've yet even processed the level of the challenge that Dr. West is mounting to this establishment and the number of people who are going to say, no, we're not going to let you do this. No, I'm not talking about physical threats now. I'm talking about the different ways in which they will come at him to stop him. So, we're coming from a place of faith. And when I say faith and Christian faith, I want to reiterate, I respect all faiths. I respect agnostic, atheists, and people who follow any prophet or any. I happen to be raised Christian, so I don't want to ever speak about Christian faith. We have separation of church and state in this country, and I want to be very mindful of that. But I will speak of faith, and of course, Dr. West speaks about his faith as part of his moral code. So please let me put that out there as well in terms of what we mean by faith. But anyway, so yeah, it's a valid question. I mean, no doubt we're going to have to look at where are these threats coming from to block this insurgent movement.
All right. Well, Peter, thank you so much for your time. I know I think I told you 45 minutes, but I tend to go over for some reason. But thank you so much for your time again. Absolutely. Thank you for coming on. I know this is not necessarily the easiest thing to do, but people do have questions. And I think, you answered a lot of those questions that people had. So thank you so much for doing that. And what can we look forward to in reference to Dr. West's campaign shortly, coming up soon?
Coming up soon, and I think there's going to be some climate focus in New York. There's a wonderful march that's going on, so you're going to see a lot of climate stuff going on. But you're going to see in the coming days and weeks, solidarity with strikers. You're going to see Dr. West out there. So we will let you know in advance. We'll put out press releases. We will let our friends know in the media, and we want to support independent media. Sabby, what you do and what independent and leftist media does is absolutely essential to getting the message out. So we will make sure everybody knows events that are coming up, stuff like that. So I don't want to give great detail because frankly I've only been here for 5 days at the campaign, and I'm just trying to pull the whole team together. But there will be great stuff to come. And Dr. West is such a figure. When he's out there, everybody hears him. He has that megaphone just naturally based on who he is and how he communicates. So thank you so much, Abby. I really appreciate this, and I appreciate the fair and hard questions, but I just spoke from my heart. So I hope that has answered some of the concerns.
Well said. Thank you so much, Peter.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Bye.